Someone does a careful, disciplined grocery shop, sticking closely to a planned list, avoiding the tempting snack aisle entirely, feeling genuinely proud of their restraint. Then they stand in the checkout line for 4 minutes, and a candy bar somehow ends up in the cart anyway, added almost without a conscious decision being made at all. This isn't a failure of willpower in any simple sense, and it isn't really about candy being irresistible either. The checkout lane is one of the most carefully engineered retail spaces in the entire store, positioned and stocked based on decades of research into exactly when and why a shopper's resistance to small, unplanned purchases predictably weakens, and understanding that mechanism explains why this specific spot works so consistently well. It's a small, almost funny thing to realize afterward, standing there with a candy bar you have no memory of actually deciding to buy, that the decision wasn't really a decision at all in the way it felt like one, so much as the predictable output of a system that had been quietly working on you the entire trip. Checkout impulse purchases get discussed casually as simple temptation. Candy looks good, people are hungry, small purchases feel harmless compared to the larger cart total already accumulated. And those factors genuinely do play some role. But according to research published by consumer psychology researchers and retail industry analysts studying point-of-sale behavior, the checkout lane's effectiveness relies heavily on a specific psychological state called decision fatigue, a well-documented phenomenon where the quality and resistance of a person's decision-making measurably deteriorates after a string of prior decisions. Meaning the checkout line isn't simply presenting tempting items, it's presenting them at the exact moment. A shopper's capacity to resist is already measurably depleted from the shopping trip itself. This distinction matters because it shifts the explanation away from something specific to any individual shopper's character or discipline and toward a predictable psychological state that research suggests affects nearly everyone the same way, given enough preceding decisions and the right kind of low-stakes temptation waiting at the end of them. Let's start with the basic mechanics of decision fatigue, because the underlying psychological research explains why this specific location matters so much more than simply candy is tempting would suggest. Every decision a person makes, including small, seemingly trivial ones like choosing between brands or deciding whether to buy a slightly more expensive item, draws on a limited cognitive resource that depletes with use over a shopping trip. Research on decision fatigue, drawing from broader psychological studies on self-control and willpower depletion, has found that people who've already made numerous decisions show measurably reduced ability to resist subsequent temptations or make careful, deliberate choices, compared to people facing the same choice at the start of a similar decision-making sequence. The technical process from a retailer's perspective works like this. A typical grocery trip requires dozens of small decisions: which specific brand, which size, whether to substitute an item, whether something is worth the price, and by the time a shopper reaches checkout, having made all of those decisions already, their remaining capacity for deliberate resistance to one more small, low-stakes purchase decision is measurably lower than it was walking in the door. This is where an invisible retail design principle takes over, one that most shoppers never consciously register, even while standing directly inside it. Checkout lane placement isn't simply the leftover space near the exit, it's a deliberately engineered final decision point, positioned specifically to intercept shoppers at their point of maximum decision fatigue and minimum remaining resistance. Stocked with items chosen specifically for their low individual price point, high perceived reward relative to that price, and minimal consideration required, small candy, gum, and magazines rarely require the kind of careful evaluation a larger grocery purchase does. Retail merchandising research and industry trade publications have extensively documented that checkout placement, product selection, and even the height and visibility of specific items on checkout shelving get optimized through controlled testing measuring actual purchase conversion rates. Meaning the specific candy bars visible at eye level in a specific checkout lane were very likely selected based on measured sales performance data, rather than arbitrary stocking decisions. There's a related invisible mechanism tied to the waiting time itself, one that retailers actively manage rather than simply tolerate as an unavoidable inconvenience. The checkout line creates a uniquely captive attention window. A shopper standing in line has functionally nothing else to do. No more shopping decisions left to make, no distraction from browsing other aisles, just idle time and direct sightline exposure to whatever products are positioned immediately around them. Retail research has found that this specific combination, depleted decision-making capacity, plus a captive, low-distraction waiting period, plus close physical proximity to low-cost, high-reward items, creates measurably higher purchase conversion rates for checkout position items compared to identical items placed elsewhere in the store, even when the exact same product sits on a shelf just a few aisles away the entire time. Two real-world patterns make this concrete. Retail industry sales data consistently shows that checkout-adjacent product categories, candy, gum, small impulse-oriented magazines, and single-serving snacks, generate a disproportionately large share of total sales for those specific product categories relative to the small physical footprint the checkout area occupies within the overall store. A pattern retailers actively track and optimize as a distinct sales channel separate from planned grocery purchasing. A second pattern shows up in how grocery chains have experimented with placing healthier snack options in checkout lanes, specifically in response to public health criticism and, in some jurisdictions, actual regulatory pressure or voluntary industry commitments. Research studying these swaps has found that healthier checkout options do sell reasonably well in that same high conversion position, suggesting the mechanism driving checkout sales is fundamentally about position and timing rather than being specific to candy or unhealthy snacks themselves. This challenges the common assumption that checkout impulse purchases reflect a simple, individual failure of willpower or an unusually strong craving overriding otherwise disciplined shopping intentions. In reality, a meaningful share of checkout purchasing behavior reflects a predictable, well-researched psychological state, decision fatigue, being deliberately intercepted by carefully tested retail positioning, rather than reflecting anything unique or personally weak about any specific shopper's self-control on that particular day. The friction point isn't that retailers are doing something illegitimate by stocking a checkout lane. Businesses generally have every right to merchandise their stores strategically. It's that most shoppers experience this specific purchase as a personal choice made in a vacuum, when it's actually happening at a location and moment specifically selected, because that combination reliably produces exactly this outcome across large numbers of different shoppers. Zoom out, and this same intercept decision-making at its most depleted point pattern shows up in other consumer environments built around a similar principle. Online checkout flows for e-commerce websites frequently display small, low-cost add-on items, phone cases, extended warranties, small accessories, at the exact final step of a purchase after a shopper has already made every major decision about the primary item, mirroring the physical checkout lane's timing almost exactly. Casino and gaming venue layouts similarly position high-margin, low-consideration purchases, drinks, small wagers, novelty items, at transition points where a person's attention has just been occupied by a preceding, more effortful decision, capitalizing on the same general principle that resistance measurably weakens immediately following a string of prior choices. In every one of these environments, the specific product changes, but the underlying strategy stays remarkably consistent. Identify the exact point in a person's experience where deliberate resistance is at its lowest, and position the smallest, easiest, most reward-dense decision precisely there, rather than anywhere earlier in the sequence when that same resistance would have been fully intact. So the next time a small, unplanned item ends up in a cart despite a genuinely disciplined shopping trip, it's worth remembering what that moment actually represents. It probably isn't evidence of weak willpower or an unusually strong craving that happened to strike at exactly the wrong time. It's more likely the predictable, measurable result of standing in precisely the location retail research identified as the point where decision-making resistance reliably runs lowest, stocked with exactly the kind of low-cost, low-consideration items specifically selected to take advantage of that well-documented moment.